is Mallory.
And I'm Natalie.
We are continuing our deep dive into Hebrews. We will be studying Hebrews chapter 7 this week.
Yes, so we're really happy that you're here, and we really enjoyed reading this chapter because I don't know, I just felt like I made it was easier to make connections and to
I definitely had more notes on this chapter than I did on chapter 6.
Okay.
So I feel like that's because I kind of understood it or it clicked a little bit more.
It was a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
I feel like 6 has a lot of stuff in it, but for me I just had like a lot of questions, like, okay, what, and I know there's some like debates and theological discussions about it. So.
Right. I didn't know that, but I knew that it was kind of going over my head for 6. And 7, like, again, I feel like, I was able to wrap my head around it a little bit more. But all that to say, let's jump in. I'm going to read from the ESV Bible and chapter 7, verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham appointed a 10th part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then he is also King of Salem, that is, King of Peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever.
So I'm going to summarize verses 4 through 25 very quickly. We already recorded, this is our 3rd recording.
Yes.
And it was kind of a challenge for me to do it fast, so I'm going to try this. Verses 4 through 10 basically talk about how Abraham gave a 10th of his spoils or his possessions to Melchizedek. Now Melchizedek was a king, but after Abraham had defeated or had rescued back Lot, he gave this tithe to Melchizedek. And what I think that the author of Hebrews is saying here is that, look, you're used to giving your tithe to Levitical priests, and you would not necessarily think of giving your tithes to anybody else, but Abraham has gave his tithes to Melchizedek. And this then sets up for verse 11 through basically 11 through 14. Okay, so Jesus is a high priest, but he's not a Levite. He's not from the Levitical priesthood. He's from the tribe of Judah. And so I'm thinking that the people who received this letter are thinking, okay, we give this to the Levitical priests, the tithe, and why would we give it to Jesus, or why would we treat him like a high priest when he's from the tribe of Judah? And then verses 15 through 22 basically talk about how the reason why is because Jesus is a high priest. He's just of a different order. He's from the Melchizedek order, not the Levitical order of priests. So Melchizedek is a priest, and Jesus is a priest under that order. And it's God who appointed Jesus as priest. So in verse 17, it says, for it is witnessed of him, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Talking about Jesus, how he's priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And then also in verse 20 through 22, it says, and it was not without an oath, for those who formerly became priests were made such without an oath. This one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. And I also should have read verse 16. It says, Jesus, who has become a priest, not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. So Jesus is, Jesus is appointed high priest by God, not through bodily descent, like father, son, but by God, because of his indestructible life that he was resurrected from the dead. And then verses 23 through 25 talk about how the current, or not the current priests, but the former priests, who are of the Levitical priesthood, well, they had weaknesses. They would die, right? They had to make their own sacrifices for their own sins. Where Jesus, he doesn't. He lives forever. And I love verse 25. It says, consequently, he is able to save the uttermost, those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. So he's not going to die, and he's able to intercede because he's alive, like always. All right, that's just a quick summary.
Well, you just heard the quick summary that Natalie did on Hebrews 7. We are now going to jump into the discussion. Woo.
Yes.
So I think my first observation from this was, so I was noticing that just like the theme throughout Hebrews so far of kind of putting up this argument or this stance of like, this is why Jesus is amazing, this is why he's powerful, this is why he deserves our devotion and to follow him. It also has that underlining kind of same theme throughout Hebrews that it also has is about talking about the characteristics of Jesus and kind of emphasizing those as well. In verse 26, I noticed that, where it kind of talks about the character of Christ, of Jesus, where it kind of talks about how he's holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, exalted above heavens. Again, these are such amazing characteristics and just describing him and glorifying him, and I really, really liked that. It's another characterization of who Jesus is.
And if we go back to remembering like who is written for, right? It's trying to, in a sense, convince these people that Jesus is someone to follow and worship. And so the author is like kind of comparing him to the human, well, not, I mean, Jesus is human, but like the author is comparing him to the other priests and their weaknesses, and how Jesus was able to like overcome them, right, with his perfect life here on earth. So I think that's part of the purpose of that list of exalting characteristics of like who he is. It's like part of the reason why it was listed there.
Yeah, and again, it talks about in 27 and 28, which then we've also Natalie described in their summary, that the end of Hebrews 7 kind of summarizes it for us, I think, but it again talks about like his sacrifice on the cross, the Son who has been made perfect forever, verse 28. Again, talking about how Jesus is that high priest,
right?
Forever, and that's not going to change. There's no changing of the guard, in a sense, of the priests, and we don't have to kind of think about that anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, this kind of hypothetical, I don't know if that's the right word, but what a pain it would be to like depend on a weak priest over and over and over again, right? To intercede on our behalf with God, etc. But we have Jesus who no longer do like great leaders who might be priests, they pass away, and then you don't know if you have another great leader or one who is like very sinful and wicked, but we know we have one that's perfect and who will never die, and who is in constant communication with the Father and
intercedes on our behalf in a perfect way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
and the cool thing too is like you think about the priests back in that time, it's they didn't know intimately every single person, right? So when the priest would go in there and intercede for the people, I feel like they're probably doing it in a more of like overarching, but
very general,
yeah. And like he didn't know the intricacies of every single person, and
or didn't have like a deep relationship.
Yeah, and so I'm like, how cool is like our high priest Jesus knows us very intimately. He can intercede us to like the thing that maybe we've never told anyone, or that one thought, or whatever it may be. Like he is the one there, and he knows us so much, and he loves us so much, and we have that relationship with him, versus how it was in the Old Testament with like an actual person,
right?
a flawed person that
Yeah.
didn't have the capability.
Right.
So I thought that was cool. I had one question that wasn't answered in your summary. So maybe you have some insight. But verse 28 says, "For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever." What is the word of oath?
So if we go to verse 17, it says, "For it is witness of him, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." So we're talking about Jesus here. "From the one hand, a former commandment is set aside because of his weakness and uselessness, for the law made nothing perfect. But on the other hand, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath, for those who formerly became priests were made such without an oath. But this one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, 'The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are priest forever.' This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant." So I believe that the oath is referring to God making, the Father making Jesus
Right.
a priest forever. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, so that would make sense. I'm thinking, so the law appoints men in their weaknesses as high priests, but the word of the oath, which we're talking about God, then appointing Jesus, which came later than the law, because Jesus arrived later or after the law was already established, appoints the Son who has been made perfect forever.
Right,
So
and
that's what I'm thinking.
that oath is not given to like the other priests, the other Levitical.
Right. It doesn't fall in line with that.
But the oath is given to Jesus. So I think that's
kind of what we're saying. Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it
that kind of clarifies, yeah. Any other observations or notes that you wanted to give for this one?
I think that we did a good job of summarizing certain things. It is kind of at the end there, like 26 through 28.
Mm-hmm.
It does kind of compare. Actually, I'm not sure where it's at, so you have to edit that out. But it says here, let me see, the original law. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I have one last lesson or application that I kind of wrote a little summary, and I thought it was kind of like easy for me to kind of summarize 7, and maybe not the most like, I can edit it out, but like it's just a good summary for my mind to wrap around. And it is, Jesus is the high priest forever. He's able to save those who draw near. He intercedes on our behalf to God because of his final act on the cross. He was made perfect forever. That was kind of the gist of a little bit of that, especially the final part. A summary on top of the summary of Hebrews 7.
Great, Mallory.
So-
That's awesome.
But yeah, if you have any questions or other little insights, put it below in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you again for joining us as we kind of discussed a little bit of chapter 7. Thank you.